Stewart.
As Ron pleases, the next witness is Mr. Alan Penchef. His witness statement should be at tab 6 of the statements bundle, and I believe that is Mr. Penchef appearing from Brisbane on video.
Yes.
Mr. Penchef, can you hear me?
Yes,
It'll be necessary for you to be sworn. Have you got a Bible there?
I do, yes.
Would you take the Bible in your hand and stand for me, please? And repeat after me.
I do, yes.
Would you take the Bible in your hand and stand for me, please? I shall give in this royal commission
That the evidence I shall give in this royal commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. You can sit down now, thanks. Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Penchef, would you state your full names, please?
Alan Christopher Penchef.
Do you have a copy of your statement for the Royal Commission dated 10 July 2015 available to you?
I do, yes.
Are there any corrections you wish to make to that statement?
In terms of corrections, having read over the documents you've provided, it has brought back to my mind some information that I hadn't recalled, but not in terms of corrections, no.
So the point is you would say more now than what you said, but not say it differently, is that it?
Yeah, as I said, that information reminded me of what happened 12 years ago, whereas it had been, in my memory, quite dull at the time of the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Penchef. Well, perhaps some of that detail will emerge in the things that I am to ask you about. Do you then confirm your statement as true and correct?
Yes.
I attended the statement, Your
It'll
Honour.
be Exhibit 2918.
Now, Mr. Penchef, as I understand it, you've been a Jehovah's Witness for the past 41 years, is that right?
That's correct.
How did you come to be a Jehovah's Witness?
I was contacted when I was 19 in the door-to-door ministry that the witnesses conduct, and started a Bible study. I then studied the Bible with them for a period of time, was convinced of what I was being taught, and in turn became a baptised, dedicated witness.
And when were you first appointed an elder, Mr. Penchef?
I don't remember the exact date, but I would say it would be around 35 years ago. I was baptised in 1973, so I'm thinking it was about 6 years later.
So about 1979 or so.
In that time frame, yes.
Yes. And have you served continuously as an elder since then?
Yes.
And what is your current congregation, Mr. Penchef?
Manly, Queensland.
And for how long have you served as an elder in that congregation?
7 years.
How big is that congregation?
Approximately 100 publishers.
Now, do you recall the dates on which you were an elder in the Logan Home congregation?
I was there for 14 years. I left in 2005. So I guess that takes it back to around 1991 through to 2005.
And how big was that congregation when you served there?
I think around between 120 to 150.
Thank you. Now, in your statement, Mr. Penchef, at paragraph 4.1, you say that to the best of your recollection, you've only dealt with a couple of cases of child sexual abuse within the church in your time. as they are a very rare event amongst Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, you will have heard that it's been presented in these proceedings that there were 1,006 alleged perpetrators of child sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witness Church in 65 years. Did you hear that?
Yes, I did see that.
And in respect of substantial number of those alleged perpetrators, there may be several allegations. Do you accept that?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry?
In respect of substantial numbers, or at least some of those alleged perpetrators, there may be several allegations. In other words, more than just one case.
So more than one person accusing the perpetrator? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I guess so. I wouldn't know.
But even on the figure of 1,006, that amounts to 15 perpetrators per year on average, which is more than one a month. On that basis, would you still say that it's an extremely rare event amongst Jehovah's Witnesses?
Considering the number of congregations and the number of cases, yes.
Yes. Now, if we look specifically at BCG's case, as I understand it, you were an elder at the Logan Home congregation when BCH, that's BCG's father, joined that congregation. Is that right?
That's correct.
And he came to you from St. George after he'd been reinstated by Mariba. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
And as I understand it, you then came to chair a judicial committee at Logan Home looking into the possible disfellowshipping of BCH once again. Is that right?
Yes.
I'd like you to have a look at tab 40,
Yes.
Which, if yours is the same as mine, would be a letter dated 1 November 2002 from Watchtower Australia to the presiding overseer at Logan Home. Is that the one you have?
It is, yes.
And that was in the period that you were an elder at Logan Home. This particular letter is addressed to dear brother Harrop. Was he the presiding overseer at that time?
Yes, he was.
Did you become aware of this letter?
Yes.
You'll see on the second page the branch. Well, sorry, before you go to the second page, just looking at the first page, who do you understand this letter to be coming from at the branch?
In terms of individual or persons, there's no person's name attached. It usually would come from the service department.
Right, you see it says LLC, the reference that's given at the top next to the date. Do you know what that
Yes.
reflects?
No.
You don't. But you would expect that it would come from the service department.
Yeah, the service department in the branch.
And you'll see that the branch says that they're writing in connection with Brother BCH, who we understand associates with the Logan Home congregation. He was disfellowshipped in the Mariba congregation in 1989 and reinstated in 1992. And then it goes on in the second paragraph to mention that he has recently been prosecuted for sexually interfering with two of his daughters some years ago. And then various aspects of the history are set out. But now if you look at the second page and the third last paragraph, the one that begins 2 elders, do you see that?
Yes.
So it says 2 elders should be appointed to approach Brother BCH and inform him that they are aware that he has been charged by 2 of his daughters of sexually molesting them. And the elders should also inform him that they are aware it is a matter of public record, and so it goes on. Were you then one of the 2 elders who was appointed to look into this matter?
I was.
And was that the cause of a judicial committee then being established?
yes,
And that's the Judicial Committee you served on.
that's correct.
Right, if you then look at tab 41, on the face of it is a memorandum from the service, I beg your pardon, from legal V2 to the service department, 23 January 2003. I take it this didn't come to your attention at that time, back in when you were dealing with the matter?
No, that was a branch memorandum. It wasn't sent to the congregation.
Yes. And if one looks at the last paragraph on page 3, and the legal department is saying, as I understand it, and I want to know what your understanding was at the time, that the charge against BCH for your Judicial Committee was one of lying. Is that right? See, the last sentence says the primary issue before the present committee is the charge of lying.
Yeah, that's correct. The initial allegations by BCG had already been established, so we were dealing with whether he was continuing to tell the truth.
Yes, well, I'll come back to what had been established and what hadn't in a moment. Would you take a look at tab 42? Now, this is the form being the formal recordal of his now second disfellowshipping, that's BCH's, on 11 March 2003, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And I take it that's your second disfellowshipping, that's BCH's, on 11 March 2003, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the middle of the page it sets out the reasons for the disfellowshipping.
Yes.
Now, the previous disfellowshipping, that's the one in 1989, was, amongst other things, in respect of child sexual abuse against one of his daughters, BCG, is that right?
I wasn't. I believe so, based on what I've read. Yes.
Yes. And you disfellowshipped him now for lying. Is that right?
Yeah, lying in relation to the allegations his daughter was making.
Yes. So, in your reasons, you say that he denies the child abuse allegations of his 3 daughters and lies about it. Is that right?
Yes.
So you, as I understood it, accepted that the child abuse allegations in respect of the other daughters was true. Accepted that the child abuse allegations in respect of the other.
So that we were forced to believe that it was true. Yes.
So you accepted the evidence that was presented to you in relation to that, and accepted that he had abused daughters in addition to BCG.
Based on their 3 testimonies, yes, but the courts would later establish that legally.
Are you able to explain why the allegations by the other daughters were not considered for the disfellowshipping? In other words, why was he not disfellowshipped the second time for, as it would be put, I understand, porneia in relation to his other 2 daughters rather than for lying?
In the letter from the branch, it asked us just to leave the other allegations from the other daughter until the legal case had been finalised. We were mainly to look at his current honesty with regard to what had happened, and as a result, when we questioned him, we felt we didn't have to wait to disfellowship him after with regard to what had happened. And as a result, when we questioned him.
And then if we have a look at tab 43, document dated 23 March 2002, and it has 3 names across the bottom, including 2 signatures. I see there's not a signature adjacent to your name. Is this nevertheless the recorded decision of your Judicial Committee?
Yes, that's an expanded explanation.
Yes. And notwithstanding your signature is not there, are we to understand that you engaged in and supported the reasons that are set out in this document?
Absolutely.
Are you aware whether you signed another copy of the document?
No, I'm surprised I haven't signed this one, and I would have an eye. It must have just been an oversight.
And did you, as chair of that committee, actually write the document?
I believe so, yes.
So there's no respect in which you disagree with it?
No, I fully agree with it.
Mr. Pinchef, a moment ago you said that you were forced to the conclusion that he was lying, and in this document you see towards the end of it, you say, if you look at it with me, we had no choice but to disfellowship him. What are you meaning? Are you saying that it was difficult to come to that conclusion, or what?
No, not at all. We, as you know, we use the Bible principle of there being 2 or 3 witnesses to a allegation. In this case, there were 3, so that drew us to what was a logical conclusion that something had happened, and we then decided that rather than wait any longer, we could remove him from the congregation to protect him and any other potential victims, or protect the congregation rather, or any other potential victims. So we weren't hesitant. We were just looking for the right grounds based on the direction we'd been given at the time.
Now, Mr. Pinchef, just in relation to what you said a few minutes ago about why your Judicial Committee did not investigate the complaints of abuse of the other daughters, and your answer was that you'd been instructed by the branch to leave those alone because they were the subject of the criminal trial. At least that's as I understood you. Is that right?
Yes, if you go back to the document, the first letter that you read, or you commented on.
That's at tab 40.
Tab 40, yes.
The letter of 1 November 2002.
That's correct, yeah.
Yes, and what are you referring to in that letter?
I'll just go through there. At the top of the page, the first paragraph, it said, "We do not want you to follow up on the matter involving BCG, since it has already been handled to the extent possible at this stage. We simply provide this as background information to assist you to be aware of the kind of actions that Brother BCH has exhibited in connection with past wrongdoing." And then it says, "As mentioned already, Brother BCH has pleaded guilty to sexually abusing another of his daughters, BCL. We understand that this incident in question occurred in '88. I was approximately 6 years of age, etc." And then, "This is the first we have heard of this accusation." A little further down, "We understand this has never been handled. We therefore want the elders in your congregation to handle the matter, and we suggest you proceed with in the following manner. 2 elders should be appointed to approach Brother BCH, informing that they are aware that he has been charged by 2 of his daughters of sexually molesting them, and then should inform him that they are aware of the matter being on public record, and that it is a matter of public record that he has entered a plea of guilty to 3 charges of sexual assault and to 1 charge of sexually interfering with one of his daughters when she was 6. He should be asked to explain his actions. We would like to assault and to 1 charge of sexually interfering with one of his daughters when she was 6. He should be asked to explain his actions. We would like to think that he'll be forthcoming with sufficient information to enable the matter to be handled judicially. If he's not prepared to cooperate and provide with the elders an admission of his wrongdoing, even though he has already done so on public record, I'd like them to contact the legal department before proceeding further. If you have any questions, please contact us. And I think a bit earlier there was some comments too.
Well, Mr. Penchef, the bits that you've read, including the bit that you cut short at the end of the last sentence you read, which said you'll likely be disfellowshipped for sexually abusing BCL, in other words, another daughter as a child, as well as for being dishonest, seemed to suggest that the branch was telling you that you should now handle the matter that had not previously been handled, in other words, the abuse of BCL. In other words...
I'll just read back a little further because I didn't highlight the point, but I felt in that letter the direction was clear. Just give me a moment. I think I had reference to that, the first paragraph that I read, that we weren't to follow up on the matter regarding BCG. We provide this as background to assist you to be aware of the kind of action that he has exhibited. The second daughter was not involved with Jehovah's Witnesses at the time, and the matter was before the court. So based on that, it wasn't. We were to leave it to when the court took action to make that final decision. So we were more looking at his honesty in this particular instance, and as opposed to dealing with the second allegation.
Well, that certainly suggests, Mr. Penchef, doesn't it, that in the view that your judicial committee took of matters, a charge of dishonesty is more serious and pressing to be investigated and resolved than a charge of sexual abuse of a daughter.
No, the two go hand in hand. We were looking at his honesty in regard to the sexual abuse of the daughter.
Well,
we weren't looking at whether he stole something from the corner shop. We were talking about some serious allegations to which he had already confessed and now was denying. So we were very serious about that matter, but we were leaving the legal side of, or the legal system to establish it legally. We couldn't establish it by talking to his second daughter because she wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. So we had to go by what the legal system would come up with and what the gentleman involved here was prepared to say about it.
well,
But the two were inextricably linked. We weren't divorcing one from the other.
Well, I have to say that your professed seriousness with regard to how you dealt with the question of the abuse of BCL is not supported by the reasons that you gave.
In what way?
It put the dishonesty front and centre and not the sexual abuse.
But can't you see that the two are the same? It's dishonesty in regard to that. And we left the matter to the legal system to establish it legally.
Well, perhaps we'll leave that, Mr. Penchef, as a matter for submissions in due course. Can I ask you to have a look at tab 46? Now, this is a letter that came from the branch in May of 2006 to the Judicial Committee at Logan Home. But on the basis of what you told us earlier, I might understand that you had left Logan Home by that time.
Yes, I left in 2005, so I never saw this correspondence.
Yes. Now, there's further correspondence with regard to the Chimera congregation and then subsequently the Kalamunda congregation, from where BCH was seeking reinstatement. I take it you were not involved in any of that?
No, after 2005, that would have been handled by the then body of elders in Loganholme.
Do you nevertheless know what the ultimate outcome has been? In other words, has BCH been reinstated or not?
To my understanding, no.
Thank you, Your Honour. Those are my questions.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yes, Your Honour.
Mr. Coyne, the only one?
None from me, Your Honour.
Yes, Mr. Coyne.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Coyne. I represent Mr. Penchef and others. Could we bring up tab 46, please? Mr. Penchef, you have a copy of tab 46, do you not?
I do, yes.
That was the letter that you were just directed to?
Yes.
Okay. Your committee disfellowshipped BCH in 2003. Is that right?
Yes.
So if you look at that letter, if you go to the second last paragraph of the first page, that is what is stated there at the beginning of that paragraph. BCH was disfellowshipped again in 2003.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. If you then go to the following paragraph, it says, after corresponding with the branch office, the Judicial Committee decided to disfellowship him on the charge of lying. The S77 report stated that he has continued to change his story depending on what he thinks is the most expedient at the time, and that on 3 separate occasions he denied the charges but later confessed. They wrote, and when they say they wrote, that's talking about your committee, is that correct?
Yeah, that's a quotation from those earlier documents.
Yes, and you said he has 3 daughters claiming he molested them, and he continues to deny their claims and lies about it to the Judicial Committee and law courts to suit his own ends. Although the Judicial Committee were aware of further allegations of sexual abuse being raised by 2 other daughters, it appears that they did not make any statements to the elders at the time. Apparently they received legal advice not to disclose this information, as it may have prejudiced the legal case against their father. Correct?
That's what it reads, yes.
Is that your understanding? It may have prejudiced the legal case against their father. Correct?
That's what it reads, yes.
Is that your understanding of the advice received by the committee when you were dealing with this matter?
Yes.
And at the next paragraph, it says, in summary, it is our understanding that the allegations of sexual abuse made against Mr. BCH have been clearly substantiated.
Definitely.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Penchef. That concludes your evidence and you're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honour, the next witness will be Mr. Rodney Spinks.
Is there a Bible over there? One of yours? Mr. Spinks, it'll be necessary to have you sworn to tell the truth. I see you have a Bible with you, is that right?
Yes.
Could Would you repeat after me, please? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the
the
truth,
whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat. Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Your Honour, please. Mr. Spinks, would you state your full names, please?
Rodney Peter Spinks.
And do you have, excuse me, a copy of your statement for the Royal Commission dated 10 July 2015?
Yes.
Are there any amendments you wish to make to the statement?
No.
Do you confirm the statement to be true and correct?
Yes.
I tender the statement, Your Honour.
It'll be Exhibit 2919.
Mr. Spinks, what is your current occupation?
I'm a full-time volunteer minister at the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses here in Sydney.
And in particular, what position or role do you occupy at those headquarters?
In the service department, caring for service desk responsibilities as a senior service desk member.
Are you the senior service desk member?
We explain it that way so everyone can understand it. I'm the longest serving, consulted by other service desks. I have no different title, but yes, the senior service desk.
And that's a full-time responsibility, is it?
Correct.
And is that an employed position?
No. No salary. I'm provided with accommodation, basic necessities, no salary.
And is that through being a member, or are you a member of the Worldwide Order of Special Full-Time Servants of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Correct.
And that's an organisation that provides for people in full-time positions such as yourself, is that right?
That's correct.
And so do you live at the branch office premises?
Yes, my wife and I have a room there.
Yes. And is there some sort of stipend attached to that?
Around $10 per day, yes, to cover incidental personal hygiene expenses, etc.
And as I understand it, you've been at the branch office since 2007, is that right?
That's correct.
And you've been associated with the Jehovah's Witnesses since 1965?
Yes, that's when my parents first became Jehovah's Witnesses.
And you were baptised as a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses more than 40 years ago?
Yes.
So would it be fair to say that membership of the Jehovah's Witnesses has been a defining feature of your whole life?
Absolutely.
You served as a ministerial servant from the early 1980s, is that right?
Yes.
And as a congregation elder since 1987.
Yes.
Now, in your statement, you say you were a member of the Beenleigh East congregation from 1978 to 1990. When were you an elder there at Beenleigh East?
I was first appointed as an elder in Beenleigh.
And when was that?
I think from recollection it was 1987.
And do you recall when it was in 1990 that you left Beenleigh?
Yes. September, October 1990, I moved to North Queensland.
Now, you've mentioned there's a service desk at the branch office. How many people work at the service desk?
In the 8.5, 9 years I've been there, it's varied according to workload. Presently, 5 members specifically service desk. It has been more, but currently 5.
And how many people work at the branch office in total?
Again, it varies. They're all volunteers, between 350 to 400 at any time.
And how many are actually accommodated there?
Most of those, we have a few commuters, but the majority of those would be accommodated there.
So since 10 July and now, which is the 4th of August, has the number of people at the service desk changed considerably?
No, not considerably. I think one older member has gone to other duties, but it's been a similar number in the time that I've been there, maybe one or two more at various times.
Well, perhaps you can clarify for me, is there a distinction between the service department and the service desk?
A small distinction. The service department is the entire group that effectively interface with the congregations. And so the duties all relate to what we would call the service or ministry. So the 5 I've spoken of specifically deal with congregation spiritual type matters. But we have a desk and assistant caring for conventions, for the formation of new congregations, for maintenance of the jw.org website, etc.
I see. And the legal department, is that separate from the service department?
It's located separately within the branch office there with its own staff.
And so what other departments are there besides service and legal?
So we have a large printery, so there's a significant number of the volunteers are engaged with our large printing presses. We have a large shipping department where trucks coming and going and literature are coming in and out. In addition, we obviously have a graphics department for the preparation of materials, a number of support services, large housekeeping contingency. We have a large kitchen and dining room that are all well staffed. We have volunteer engineering, gardening, etc. And we also have a large design build office for construction of Kingdom Halls and branch offices in the region. So that's just a few of the departments. There are others too.
And the 350 to 400 volunteers who reside at the branch headquarters, if I might refer to it as that, are they separately members of congregations, or is there a congregation there? What do they do for their ordinary weekly worship?
Yeah, they're all members of different congregations from Sydney City to Penrith to down to Wollongong, so a few in each congregation within travelling distance.
Can you explain what is the responsibility of the service department as a whole, and in particular distinguishing it from the legal department?
So how we would define it internally, and I'm happy to expand on that, but the service department deals with the theocratic or spiritual aspects, particularly of the work. The primary role of the legal department is obviously there are corporations, there are property issues, etc., and also advice in relation to legal matters that the service department might deal with. So there's certainly an integration between the legal department and the service department on some matters.
And perhaps you could help me, because in some of the correspondence it's not clear, to me at least, who it's come from, who's generated it. So a number of the documents or correspondence have the initials SD. What are we to understand that to refer to?
That certainly comes out of the service department.
Right, but not necessarily the service. Correspondence have the initials SD. What are we to understand that to refer to? SD. There are the initials SSA. How are we to understand that?
So workflow related. So depending on what workflow an individual's working on, it's all electronic now. The workflow comes in electronically and out electronically, so it's what I would refer to as a workflow assignment method for distributing the work around the department.
Well, this particular initial SSA goes back a long time. I imagine long before it was all digitally done or electronically done, but perhaps I'm wrong. Can you just explain that? Because there's SSA, I've seen SSD, SSG, SSB. Are those particular individuals given that cipher, or how does it work?
It would certainly be a particular individual on a day or a week, perhaps a month. The workflow, for example, that I've generated in the time that I've been there has been with 4 or 5 different desk symbols depending on which particular work. But it's true to say that on a particular day, the department would know who's handling the SSA workflow.
So if there was a particular letter on a particular date which said SD:SSA, you'd be able to go back and know who was responsible for that letter?
I'd know who did it now, and probably in recent history. It'd be extremely difficult to work out which individual, whether they're still there, and 2, which individual it was that was using that desk symbol at the time, but that would be possible.
And then some of the documents have the letters CA on them. What does that represent?
I believe it relates to correspondence. It's not what I've commonly seen, but I believe that is a general correspondence desk, meaning when general inquiries come in.
Well, would you take a look at tab 26? You'll see that this is a disfellowshipping or disassociation S77 form in relation to BCH, recording the date that he was disfellowshipped and then later reinstated, and it has in the top right-hand corner CA 18 January 77 form in relation to BCH, recording the date that he was disfellowshipped and then later reinstated.
That each letter that came in physically would be opened by the elder at the correspondence desk, and he's date stamped it, so that would be whoever was opening correspondence on the 18th of January 1993.
But the CA representing that it was the correspondence desk, or representing that it was a particular elder? What is this?
To my knowledge, sorry.
Carry on.
To my knowledge, there has only ever been, certainly in my time, it's not a large task, one elder opening the mail, so whoever it was at that time, that's certainly way before my time, but it would have been the elder who was opening the mail that day.
So that's really to be taken as a receipt stamp for when the particular document arrived at, or at least was opened at the branch office?
Yes, primarily as a date stamp to say that's the date we received it.
Now, SSB, I take it as another workflow designation, as with SSA, is that right?
That's correct.
And LLC?
LLC would generally be from the legal department if it starts with an L.
All right, and then LLD, similarly, I assume?
Yes.
And LLF?
Yes.
And what about SF?
That would be out of the service department.
On the same basis as SSB or SSA, or designating something different?
I'm not sure why the different designation there. Sometimes the additional symbol related to an elder who was a secretary, that's not been constant, but SF is definitely a service department desk symbol that's been used.
Thank you. I'd like to take you to paragraph 26 of your statement. Now, you'll see, you say there that if congregation elders become aware of a child abuse allegation, they are instructed to contact the legal department in relation to reporting requirements, and then the call is transferred to the service department. So, just to understand that, does that mean that if the authorities are to be informed, in other words, I withdraw that. If the authorities are to be informed, that is a matter for the legal department to advise on, and not the service department. Is that right?
That's correct.
So the service department does not involve itself in giving advice with regard to informing authorities.
Correct.
So would there be any circumstances in your experience in which the service desk would be involved in advising elders in a congregation to report an allegation to the authorities?
The legal department advises in relation to mandatory reporting because they will be fully aware of which states and what the requirements are. It wouldn't be correct to say that the service department doesn't advise elders on that at a spiritual level, because invariably the opening discussion with elders once they come through to the service department is if we're dealing with a current allegation or abuse that is alleged to be currently taking place, the first part of the conversation is in relation to where is the victim, what's been done to protect the victim. So certainly at a theocratic level and out of concern for the family, that's certainly part of our discussion, but not the mandatory reporting requirements.
Right, well, I just want to understand that then. You say the first issue to be addressed is where is the victim in relation to a current allegation. How does that then relate or transform itself into a reporting issue? How do you deal with that with regard to reporting to authorities?
Right. It relates simply to what needs to be done to ensure that a child, a minor, is not left in a position where they could be exposed to further abuse, not from a legal perspective or requirement, but from the fact that the guardian parent, the elders and each of us are primarily concerned about what's perspective or requirement, but from the fact that the guardian parent, where that could continue.
And advice that's given by the service desk to the elders when they make a call on this first call basis, is that advice then put in writing to them or confirmed in writing?
I'd say no, because we go through the same process each time, simply referring the elders to the printed advice that's been given in that regard. And so we just simply go through that same process. Generally, correspondence starts when we give that generic advice to the elders, remembering that often when the elders call in, they have very little, if any, information. They may be passing on a second or third hand, or some rumour, some, if any, information. They may be passing on a second or third. Provide the same advice each time from the published material, then ask the elders to provide us with, in writing, the details that we can assist them with.
Let me just understand that this generic advice you supply on each occasion, what is it? What's the substance of that advice?
If I can, I'd read from the Elders' Handbook, the bit that I wrote. I read each time.
By all means, please refer us to it. So that would be tab 120. I take it that's Shepherd the Flock of God you're referring to?
Yes. Because I've been permitted to use the hard copy.
Yes, of course.
Excuse me on the ringtail reference, but it's page 100. Yes. Because I've been permitted to use the hard copy.
Yes.
So we refer the elders. They've already obviously called in. And then obviously the sentence at the end of paragraph 18 says the branch office will then give direction based on the circumstances involved in each situation. So we ask the elders at that point just to give us what basic information or detailed information that they have. Then reading the following portion, have the elders have their handbook and follow along, where it says child abuse is a crime. Never suggest to anyone that they should not report an allegation of child abuse to the police or other authorities. And myself and the other service desk elders, we always go and get a second elder so that we can both assist. So these calls are taken with 2 elders from the congregation, 2 elders in the service department. We then say, I think as I've mentioned in my statement, and I say with absolute conviction, that I'm a father, I'm a grandfather of 2 little children, and you brothers, if there's any concern that a child, a minor, remains in a situation where they're in threat of harm, to go back to the guardian parent and assist them to do all they can, including going to the authorities, if that's what the parent, guardian parent, is willing to do, including going to the authorities, and remind them that the individual, that they will have the full support of the elders in doing that, and is willing to do, including going to the authorities, and remind them that the personal decision for each individual to make. There are no congregation sanctions for either decision. Elders will not criticise anyone who reports such an allegation to the authorities. If the victim wishes to make a report, it is his or her absolute. Elders will not criticise anyone who reports such an allegation to the authorities. If in the vast majority of phone calls that we get, they would relate to historical events or events where the guardian parent has already, the phone calls that we get, they would relate to historical it takes to make sure that the child is not in a situation where they can come to harm. And I quite passionately express that to the elders, because I know what I would do if that was my grandchild, and I know from the elders that we've heard from over the last few days, that's what they would do.
So, Mr. Spinks, that's the generic advice you give, and then it's over to the elders as to what they do. Is that how we to understand it?
That's correct, although they would ring us back if they needed further discussion.
So you don't give specific advice in the particular situation and say you should do this or that. You put it at the level of generic advice as you've explained to us.
I think we've consistently said, and we appreciate that that's a matter under discussion, but we're not claiming to have said that we have instructed elders to go to the authorities, and I'm certainly not stating that that's the case now.
The material we have, as you know, indicates more than 1,000 allegations, not one of which has been reported to the authorities. And I assume you know that in different states there'll be varying responsibilities to report under the civil law when you know or believe that someone has committed a serious offence. Can you help us to understand why it should be that none have ever been reported to the authorities?
Again, Your Honour, we're not going to at any point suggest that we have telephoned the authorities or have instructed elders to do that. But as the Commission would be aware, almost 400 of those 1,000 cases over 65 years have had the intervention of the authorities. And we're not taking the high ground there and saying that we've telephoned the authorities, but realistically, almost 400 of those have been dealt with by the authorities, of which less than half have resulted in convictions. And if I can, with respect, I don't want to in any way diminish the number, because I I hate it as much as you do in saying it. Those 1,000 cases over 65 years, and I took great respect at your observation the other day that this is not a competition, so I'm loath to say anything that none of us want to go there. This is about making sure that organisations, Jehovah's Witnesses especially, do all we can and more than we've done to make sure that we're addressing this, and we welcome the opportunity. Those 1,000 cases, as the Commission is aware, 199 of those relate to individuals, and I don't want to diminish the number, I'm just presenting the facts. 199 of those relate to individuals that were either not Jehovah's Witnesses or likely may not have been Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. More than half of the allegations, well over half of the allegations are familial, and in the context with no comparison, where we're looking at ministers, clergy, those allegations include everyone who's ever walked into a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, every individual who's ever studied the Bible with us in prison, every person out of the community that associates with us where we've become aware that there's a child abuse allegation. We have followed it up, recorded it, and that's the reason there are those numbers. In the last, and I take no pride in this number, it disappoints me, and it's why we want to cooperate fully. In the last 10 years, according to the statistics, that we've not done with the accuracy that the Commission has done, and so that's a lesson for us too. But in the figures that the Commission has provided, in the last 10 years, 2 elders have committed child abuse offences. In 10 years, 2 elders, and both were dealt with by the police. In the last 10 years, 4 ministerial servants have been involved in child abuse offences, and 3 of them have been dealt with by the police. And that includes child pornography, that not just have been involved in child abuse offences, and 3 of them have been dealt with by the police. Some context to it. We agree totally. We're not trying to disguise the figure. We have willingly handed over, perhaps one of the only organisations that's kept extensive records on visitors and parishioners, and we just look at it in that context, Your Honour.
Well, I don't want to get into a complex discussion with you about this, but you do understand that the way your church is structured means that you have an internal process which looks at allegations of abuse, and for that reason the collection of your files will capture abusers, whoever they might be. You understand that?
Yes, I do.
And the fact that you have an internal process of adjudication means that within your church you are establishing a true belief in the guilt of someone of a criminal offence. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
And you understand that carries with it obligations, irrespective of whether a matter otherwise goes to the police or other authorities, carries with it an obligations upon those who make the decision that an offence has been committed to tell the authorities that they have come to that belief. Do you understand that?
I've been made aware of that since the Commission started, Your Honour.
Yes, because at the end of the day, whatever might be the church processes and consequences, the state has an interest in ensuring that the criminal law is enforced.
Absolutely.
And that hasn't been the case in the past, I assume.
I think we've acknowledged the fact that as an organisation, while we've cooperated with the authorities and certainly in mandatory reporting, but I think we've acknowledged the fact that we have not had a practice against the wishes of the victim or otherwise to directly report to the police. I acknowledge that. Even
when you know that an offence has been committed?
We've acknowledged the fact that we've not taken away from the family, and while we're happy to accept whatever recommendations come, and I think Your Honour would be aware that we have no issue with mandatory reporting. That doesn't excuse anything. It's not suggesting that we're transferring the responsibility, but our our challenge, as it has been for religious organisations, and I read it as I've waited over the last number of days, I read it in the publication that's given to victims here at the Commission from New South Wales Health, that says the victim should be given the right to determine whether it's to go to the authorities or not, and that booklet that's handed to the victim says, and their wish in that matter should be respected. Now, that's religiously the approach that we have taken for the reasons that have only been sort of briefly described, but now that's religiously the approach that if, regardless of our strongly held religious belief that individuals should have the right to determine what's done with that information, that's how we feel. It's based on Scripture, but we accept when the state says that you are required to mandatorily report what's done with that information. That's how we feel. It's based on Scripture, but we accept when the state says when there are mandatory reporting requirements with some sort of uniformity across this country, we will willingly and happily comply. In the meantime, we've got that ethical challenge of respecting the individual's right, as the New South Wales brochure says, and as the Scriptures say.
There's a subtlety in the proposition I put to you that may have escaped you. You see, what's happening within your church is you are actually determining whether or not you believe an allegation to be true. Do you understand?
Yes.
So, and if you determine that it's true, the state of knowledge of your elder ceases to be knowledge of an allegation, but becomes knowledge or belief that something has actually happened by way of a criminal offence. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Now, I know that you may have some idea of mandatory reporting, but what I was seeking to direct your attention to was that in those circumstances there will be some state laws, they won't be uniform across the country, but they'll differ from state to state, which will impose a criminal sanction on a person who knows and doesn't report. Do you understand?
It's been very well explained to me in recent weeks, Your Honour, so yes, I do.
But you won't get at the moment anyway a national response to this. It'll vary from state to state. You understand?
Yes, I think I've come to that conclusion too.
And what that means is that people like you and others in the church need to have a very good look, maybe with the help of your lawyers, at what the law actually provides.
Yes.
And what you're doing is in many respects different to what other churches might be doing, because you're actually taking allegations and resolving, as you see it, the truth of the allegation by reason of your process.
Yes, I understand.
You understand?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Spinks, you'll understand that your service desk located in New South Wales, if it receives information from elders in a congregation also in New South Wales, then there may be, under compulsion of the criminal law, section 316, an obligation on the service desk to report to authorities, never mind the elders. Do you understand that?
That, as I mentioned to His Honour, that's been recently brought to my attention, yes.
So prior to that having been brought to your attention, I take it there may be cases where the elders at the service desk have received information from elders at a congregation which, under threat of criminal sanction, should have been reported but wasn't.
Well, I'm not qualified to answer, but if I understand your question, if you're suggesting that when a victim reports perhaps to a guardian or an associate and that's reported to an elder who reports to another elder who contacts the legal department, is transferred through to the service department, and that at each step of the way there are legal sanctions that could result in criminal prosecution, if that's what you're saying. Yes, I do understand what you're saying.
Well, no, I'm saying
It doesn't quite work like that. You'll need to have, and everyone needs to have a good look at it. The section in New South Wales speaks in terms of knowledge or belief. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a state of mind, not created by hearing of an allegation. Do you understand? But I think maybe, Mr. Stewart, we need to put this into the ultimate report. I'm not sure we're going to get very far.
Yes, Your Honour. I just have one further question in relation to this, to clarify what it is that I'm meaning, Mr.
I'm not sure we're going to get very far.
Yes, Your Honour. I just have someone against whom allegations is made, then confesses to the elders in his congregation, who reports that confession to you or one of your colleagues at the service desk, and on the basis of that, you would have the belief that the allegation is true, not so.
We'd have the knowledge.
You would have the knowledge that the man had confessed.
Can I ask you to repeat? I apologise. Could you just repeat that again?
What's being put to you is that there may be an allegation,
Yes.
but when the allegation is confirmed by the alleged abuser confessing,
Yes.
admitting that he did the act,
Yes.
then it ceases to be an allegation, but it becomes an offence of which the person receiving an understanding of the confession has knowledge,
I understand.
and the act will then operate.
Yes. And Your Honour, with respect, does that apply just to ministers, or would that apply to
Applies to anyone.
every person in the
Yes.
state of New South Wales?
Well, who has the relevant knowledge.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just getting back to the generic advice you offer. Now, you'll appreciate that, and particularly in relation to the right, as you put it, of the victim to report to the police. You'll appreciate that there may be a distinction, on the one hand, between a situation where a child has been a victim and is still a child, in other words, a recent allegation and is still a child, and on the other hand, an adult reporting with regard to some allegation some time back when he or she was a child. Do you see that distinction?
I do.
And dealing then with the first scenario, as I understand it, you would see that as being up to the parent of the child to exercise that right or not to report to the authorities. Would that be right?
Scripturally, that would be our position.
Yes. And in circumstances where, let's say, for example, the allegation of abuse is against the father and the mother doesn't want to report for whatever reasons, but one can imagine easily there may be reasons she doesn't want her husband to go to jail and so on. But the child remains vulnerable as a consequence. As I understand it, you at the service desk would not advise the elders to report to the authorities.
Again, we've been transparent in what we're saying. We have not instructed elders to say at arm's length in the office, you must go and tell the authorities. The language that we've used, as I've explained, and we ask them repeatedly to do it if that's the situation. Could you go back to the guardian parent and reinforce with them that if the child remains in a dangerous position, that we need to do all we can to make sure that the child is protected. Now, I could make a statement now to the effect that, well, you know, we know that that's always happened and then no child has been harmed further. I'd love to say that. But I can say that to my knowledge, and certainly in the time that I've been there, we have not allowed a situation to say that. But I can say that to my knowledge, and certainly in the time that I've been there, knowledge only, and again I'm not suggesting evidence to this effect or listing off names, I'm saying to my knowledge, the care of the guardian parent would have already extricated the child from that situation, and repeatedly in situations over the years, that's with the assistance of the elders, the assistance with the congregation elders. But the short answer to your question, have we instructed elders to go to the authorities? We've transparently said we have not done that.
Yes, and Mr. Sphinx, have you followed the evidence of this case study over the last week and a bit?
I have.
And so you would have heard one elder after another, that's a congregational level elder, saying that they depend on advice and direction from the service desk?
Yes.
And you accept that's in reality what happens? They do depend on advice and direction from the service desk?
I do.
Is there not a gap then created between the generic advice you give and their expectation of being advised and directed, where it leaves, from your side, leaves them with discretion as to how to handle it, but from their side, leaves them with an expectation of direction with regard to how to handle it?
If I understand the point there correctly, I do agree that we've said clearly that we haven't given that instruction to the elders. So for me to say that there's an expectation that the elders would have received that as an instruction and acted on it would be inconsistent. So the point you make is correct.
Right, just taking this point a little bit further, if we take a look at your paragraph 30, so you're dealing here, perhaps we're going to scroll down a bit so we can see the heading of this section. Sorry, up. Branch Office Response, Victim Safety and Support. And you say there that you ask the current circumstances as you explained previously, that's in 28. And then we'll go down to 30. You say, I explain that as a father and a grandfather, if this was my child or grandchild, I would do everything necessary to ensure that the child is safe. And then you say, for the elders, that may involve supporting the parent or guardian in contacting the authorities or personally contacting the authorities. And then you cite an August 28, 2002 letter, and you extract a quote from that letter. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now that letter is at tab 105. We could take a look at that. And you see that's a letter from the branch to all congregations in Australia. Do we understand that to be to the elders of all congregations, or would it go to all the publishers?
When it's not addressed to the body of elders, when it's addressed to all congregations, it goes to all publishers as a letter read out at the congregation and posted on the notice board.
And on the second page, page 2, is the quote that you've extracted, which says, we have long instructed elders to report allegations of child abuse to the authorities where required by law to do so, even where it is only one witness. In any case, the elders know that if the victim wishes to make a report, it is his or her absolute right to do so. Now, of course, what that doesn't say is that the elders should themselves contact the authorities in any particular circumstances.
Correct.
And do you accept that indeed it implies the contrary? In other words, it implies that it's really up to the victim, or in certain circumstances the victim's parents, but really that it's not saying anything to the elders about the elders reporting.
Yes, you're right. I don't know that I'm saying that. I believe that the sentence in paragraph 30 is not a letter to the congregation, but me explaining to the commission what I do. And it's sort of written there, I explain that as a father and grandfather, not the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society writing. As a father and grandfather, I know what I would do. And I'm explaining that for the elders, it may involve supporting the parent guardian or personally contacting the authorities, because in the same way that as an organisation, as a faith, we are respecting the rights of the individual, we also respect the individual consciences of the elders who, as we've seen, they're all family men children, grandchildren, or whatever. We respect their conscience. We don't dictate in that sense what the elders can.
But if the elders are to have reference to the material as opposed to what you said to them on the phone, you would accept that certainly in relation to this letter, there's nothing that would encourage them under any particular circumstances to report themselves to the authorities.
I think we've said very clearly in several questions you've asked now, we've not claimed to have instructed the elders to go to the authorities, and we acknowledge that. It's somewhat different to, as we said, when the elders call in, encouraging them to do all that they can with the parent, guardian, their own conscience, etc., to do what needs to be done to protect the child. I can see the clear difference that you're making, and I accept it fully.
Now, just understanding where this letter fits in, is it current? It's a 2002 letter. I mean, to what significance are we to give it? And the reason why I ask that, is it not the case that the current position is governed by Organised to Do Jehovah's Will in 2005? That's the baptismal handbook for all publishers, am I right?
Correct.
And then also Shepherd the Flock of God 2010, which is the handbook for elders, is that right?
Correct.
And then the letter of 1 October 2012, 2010, which is the handbook for elders, is that right?
Correct.
And then the relation that this 2002 letter still has some currency.
It's pretty subjective to say. I mean, the letter wouldn't be on notice boards now, but I don't see anything in that sentence there that's any different to what we would do now, but I'm not sure the point you're making.
Well, now I'm just seeking to understand why you draw on a 2002 letter in support of the point or part of the point you're making in paragraph 30 when, as I would understand it, but I'm giving you the opportunity to show me where I've gone wrong, that letter is in the relatively distant past and has no currency.
I think that was an expectation on our part.
To show me where I've gone wrong. That letter is in the relatively distant past and has no currency.
It's what we said in 2002, and we have long instructed elders. So elders have been contacting the legal department for beyond the last couple of decades. So I think we've simply tried to say, as we have with the other documents we've provided, that we've tried to establish a pattern of these principles over a period of time. But what you say is true. We could have easily put a more recent reference there.
And just, if you can go back to your statement this time at paragraph 32. You will see that you say their spiritual comfort provided by elders to a victim is not viewed as a substitute for professional therapy. You will have heard me ask some questions of Dr. Applewhite about this. It's still the case, though, that there are restrictions imposed by the Jehovah's Witness Church on its members with regard to the types of therapy that they can, at least with the blessing of the Church, engage in.
I disagree with that completely. If I can show my reason for saying it, and that's in chapter 4 of the Elders' Handbook.
So that's tab 120.
Yes, page 55.
And that's at ringtail 56.
So when this point was previously brought up, with respect, I thought to myself when I read that paragraph, I'd like to write it for a publication that was to be presented for the general public. So I acknowledge the fact that this is written in the language of and written for elders, but it says there are times, paragraph 25, when an emotionally, the section is on helping child abuse victims, by the way. There are times when an emotionally distressed Christian may seek professional help. Whether a Christian or his family pursues treatment from psychiatrists, psychologists or therapists is a personal decision. An elder should not assume the responsibility of recommending a specific practitioner or facility. He may draw attention to or discuss material in the publication that provides cautions regarding therapies that may conflict with Bible principles. So he draws attention to some references. It continues, while participating in group therapy by a professional therapist is a matter for personal decision. And then there's a caution again, there could be a revealing of confidential facts about other members of the Christian congregation during such sessions if a Christian does not exercise discretion. So there's some comments to the elders to say those are personal decisions. As you're probably aware, there are a good number of psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, welfare workers that are Jehovah's Witnesses and have good knowledge. They're on occasion a professional that has no respect for an individual's faith in or belief in Bible principles, and we absolutely respect their right to make that decision. Whether that's, in that individual case, the best person to help a devout Christian who wants psychiatric help, wants therapy, but doesn't want their faith mocked or undermined, that's the balancing comment in there. But we have no objection to professional treatment, and I would say that a good number of those that have been affected by past child abuse have sought and received help, the ones that I'm aware of.
Well, Mr. Spinks, let's just break this down a little bit. In the latter aspect, the bit about while participating in group therapy by a professional therapist, while participating in group therapy by a professional therapist is a matter for personal decision, there could be a revealing of confidential facts about other members of the Christian congregation during such sessions. Is this not to be understood as a caution to members that if they are to participate in group therapy, they must not reveal confidential facts?
I'm not sure where you're reading that. To me, the word discretion or a matter for personal decision, I see the point that you're trying to make and where you're trying to lead, but what I read is a matter for personal decision and a matter for discretion. It says there could be a revealing of confidential facts. I don't see the don't or can't or whatever. I see discretion and I see a matter for personal decision. But I agree the sentence could be better written to be read in this context.
Let's just look at it. Mm-hmm. The first half of the sentence says, in essence, whether or not to participate in group therapy by a professional therapist is a matter for personal decision by the publisher in question. That's what the first part says. Not so. So that's what the personal decision is about. It's whether or not to participate. Do you agree?
Yes.
And then it says that the reference to discretion at the end of the sentence is not a discretion in the sense of it's a matter for their discretion as to what they reveal or not. It says that if they do not exercise discretion, they will reveal these things which they must not reveal. Discretion in the sense of caution, not authority.
I understand exactly the point you're making. I don't question it. I don't read it that way, but I'm happy for you to read it that way.
Is it not that the case that elders, the expectation is elders would read it in the way in which I've put it rather than in the way in which you've put it?
Well, that's not been my experience at all.
Okay, let's look at the other part of it. It says, he may draw, so this is the sentence just before all the references. He may draw attention to or discuss material in the publications that provides cautions regarding therapies that may conflict with Bible principles. So I take it there are therapies that conflict with Bible principles?
Yes.
And what are those?
I'd have to take the references out and again to be accurate, but there are certainly some therapies by their nature or religious practice that may involve what the Bible would refer to as like spiritistic type practices, mainstream therapy, normal psychiatric, psychological therapy. That's not what's being referred to. It's making a reference to publications that have highlighted perhaps some of the more extreme and radical therapies that have been done, and says he could draw their attention to it.
Or would this be a convenient time?
We'll have the morning adjournment.